I built the majority of my wealth buying unstable properties, properties that are deemed that have problems. Some sort of problem that you have identified where you're going to change that apartment into a different apartment. And that time period, it creates instability. And it's really important for you to have a very clear path, clear systems during that instability. I did a post the other day that did really well, and it was on properties that are unstable versus properties that are stable. And I think it's a really important distinction to make, right? I built the majority of my wealth buying unstable properties, properties that are deemed that have problems. Now, those problems could be mismanagement, right? Those probably could be a huge amount of deferred maintenance and CapEx improvements that need to be made. It could be simple things like a lot of crime, not at market rents, pest issues, some sort of problem that you have identified where you're going to change that apartment or that business into a different apartment, a different business, right? And that time period, it creates instability of that asset. And it's really important for you to have a very clear path, right? Clear systems during that instability. And I think a lot of investors get this wrong, right? Because they think about managing an asset, and most times they're thinking about creating systems and managing an asset, managing an apartment, managing a business that is stable. And that's what they create the systems for. But in my experience, I have never had a full year where all of my properties have been stable. As a real estate investor, if you want to create wealth, you're buying some sort of asset that does have a problem, right? The vast majority of us that are growing our wealth are buying value add properties or buying some sort of property where we deem is worth giving up X amount of money because we think the property is going to be more valuable. Unfortunately, it's not as easy, right, as buying the asset and just creating the value. All the time period in between, we treat very different at our company. In my opinion, it's almost two different business models. Stable properties and how you run them operate on different systems than unstable properties. And the reason for that is things like, for example, if you have a lot of deferred maintenance or CapEx and in your repositioning plan is to rehab all the units. When you're rehabbing units, have construction guys on site, there's things like noise to consider, there's disruption going on, there's vacancy, there's huge swings in operating income. Maybe 1 month you see the vacancy close and your operating income go up, and maybe your operating income swings up 10 to 15%. But typically while you're repositioning, your operating income is actually swinging down because as people leave and you renovate, it takes time, and then you have to put somebody into that unit. So you could see swings that are downward towards 10, 20, 30%. And that's fine because obviously you're renovating and you're repositioning the process and you're in that instability phase. And you need to recognize that, right? How long are you going to be in the instability phase? Because there's a risk associated with that. In fact, on a lot of my posts, this is why I talk about, I hate people that celebrate closing on a deal. It drives me crazy. Most often when you close on a deal, it's the riskiest time you're ever going to own the asset. It's risky for you, it's risky for the bank. If you want to celebrate, it should be when you sell the property, which I don't do, or when you refinance the property, which I typically do. I love refinancing because it is like a sale and you can exit most of your capital if you do it right, tax-free, while still holding onto the asset that should continue to produce income because you can't refinance it if the debt service coverage ratio doesn't meet certain requirements, right? So if the lender's willing to return your capital, that means you did a really good job with the repositioning of that asset and managing the systems and managing the time frame of that period of time when the business was in business A was going to business B. Also, think about it, right? In my business model, when we're rehabbing units, we're replacing everything. The flooring, the electrical, sometimes even the plumbing, all the appliances, countertop cabinets. Once you're done with that and the property exits to a stable property, the amount of service requests you get are substantially lower. If you move to all LED and energy efficient in these units, in these common areas, your utility bills are less. A lot of this stuff becomes much more predictable as you exit the unstable phase. When you're in the unstable phase, you have significantly more service requests because you have older appliances, older floors, older plumbing, everything that you haven't fixed yet. And on top of that, you have construction guys, rehabbing and fixing things, which is increasing cost. So that's why it's two completely different business models. You should have leasing much more intensity because you're going to have more vacancy versus a stable property that's probably much more predictable in the amount of vacancies that it's going to have month over month, year over year. Unstable property, you could have 20 vacancies 1 month on a 200 unit apartment and you could have 5 the next. You know, there's so much that you have to pay attention to during the unstable phase that I think a lot of investors forget. You just can't treat it the same, and we don't, by the way. I also think you want to have a fine balance of how many properties you have stable and then how many you have unstable, right? The stable properties are bringing in consistent cash flow and the predictability and lower risk, which is great, but they're not creating as much jump in your overall wealth, right? The unstable properties are going to give you the opportunity to bring in more wealth, right? But they're going to increase your risk. And that's why figuring out what balance your company is able to handle is really, really important. Because sometimes you see people have 90% unstable properties and it's just extremely tough to manage. Nothing is predictable, expenses are very high, CapEx is very high, you're bleeding money. You can't put your fingers on all the things that are going on. The unstable just brings a certain amount of reactiveness to managing properties. So for me, when I was really scaling, we were much heavier unstable versus stable. Today, we've kind of tilted the scales. So today, I have much more properties that are stable versus unstable. I think, you know, right now, total portfolio, I think it's somewhere around 65% stable, 35% unstable, and that number is winding down, even after closing on 1,400 units this year. Total unit count, I'd have to verify this, is somewhere around 1,800. So we're still finishing up about 400 units. You know, we're working on the new 1,400. And I want to know that, right? I want to know how many more months are left of all the properties that we're currently repositioning. And I certainly make it known to my leaders that when they're running a specific region, what properties are unstable and how are they paying attention to them? Because there should be a heightened awareness, since those are situations that are not as predictable and you're going to have to be more reactive, versus the stable properties. Stable properties should be just running really fluid. And if they're not, you got bigger problems, right? If your property has been repositioned and is now stable and operating income and NOI is not ticking up, maybe not a lot, but heading in the right direction, that's a problem too. But typically, if your systems are running well, the stable properties are heading in the right direction, right? So point of this video is, I think as a real estate investor, as you are growing your portfolio, you should really take the time to understand what percentage of my properties are unstable, what percentage of them are stable, and then know that even if you're asset managing these, you should have two different types of systems, two different types of scorecards, because one is very unpredictable and one is very predictable. And how you measure both, how you react to both, how you look at the systems and the people that go within these can help you create a lot of wealth doing it the right way. If you do it the wrong way, it can create a lot of risk and it can impact your wealth in a negative way. If you have any questions, you want me to dig into anything else on unstable and how we manage repositioning those and getting through the instability phase, let me know. I'd love to go into it. There's no right or wrong way with how quickly you necessarily do this, but for us, just so you know, we are driving and trying to shorten the lifespan of instability. You know, if a 100-unit apartment typically might take 4 years, we're going to try to get it done in 1 year. So we are going to bleed money. We're going to drive CapEx. We're going to do everything we can to get that done because we want to get to the stable phase as fast as possible, which significantly lowers risk, increases our velocity of capital, especially if we hit the certain NOI and are able to refi. And we feel that it allows us to be able to acquire more properties because we had the ones that were in the repositioning phase now stable. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.